this time we have quarterbacks coach, Rhett Rodriguez. Questions for Rhett? Greg?
So, Rhett, we just talked to your dad some about this, but same question for you. Progress of your quarterback room. What have you thought through fall camp?
Yeah, I think it's been a solid camp so far for the guys. I think we talk about a lot about stacking days and being consistent. I think, again, there's going to be some days where, one guy has a good day, one guy has a bad day, but trying to be consistent with it and taking really control and command of the offense. So understanding where your eyes are going to be. And, again, sometimes we're getting a lot of different looks on defense. Sometimes the receiver runs the wrong route. Don't panic. Make sure you move on to your next read and go from there. But I think all the quarterbacks have been pretty solid so far.
Been purposely very fair with the distribution of reps. Talk about that a little bit. Is that from your own personal experiences and just as a quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's hard. How do you balance out all the reps for everybody? Because, you don't want one guy always going with the ones, one guy always going with the twos. And, again, we don't even really know who our ones and twos are in some positions. So I try to make sure, again, you can't make it perfectly fair. There's just not enough reps to go around. But try to get everybody a chance to go with the ones. Try to get most people a chance to kind of get Skelly, and we have different tempos, offensive tempo, defensive tempo, same thing when we go team. And so, again, it's not going to be perfectly fair and perfectly even, but I try to switch it up every day just that way. Again, keeping them on their toes. They got to know what's coming. But then also, again, I've kind of had that in the past where you say you have an open competition, but one guy always gets all the ones. You're like, okay, is that really an open competition? And for us, it really is. So every day is a little different, and I try to do the best I can to rotate guys in and out.
Your dad says he's not a huge data guy, but you use it a little bit. What are some of the data points that you look at to help you make decisions?
Yeah, it's hard because how do you evaluate a quarterback? There's a lot of things that go into it because you're going to track your normal completion percentage, your touchdowns, your normal stats and all that. But then also, there's going to be drops. Sometimes throwing the ball away is a good play. And so I've kind of gone back and forth on how do you grade guys, and there's no perfect science. And I think sometimes you look too much into it. A lot of it is just kind of a feeling of who's moving the ball, who's getting us in a good position to win. But I try to look at kind of three things as well. Like the first thing is assignment. Are you doing what you're supposed to do? Or do you have your eyes in the right spot? The next part is the technique. Are you doing it the right way? Do you have the right footwork, the right mechanics? And then the last part is the execution of it. It ended up being a good play? It ended up being a bad play? Because, again, sometimes you're not doing the right thing, but it ends up being a good play. Or opposite, you might have a really good footwork, good timing, and then an inaccurate throw. And so we try to look at all those things, but it's hard because a lot of it's going to be subjective of, who's really got a control and command of the offense.
Rich has even talked about this, and it's widely documented, obviously, that Pat White got in the Louisville game and then took off. And Rich has even said that he didn't play him before that because he didn't know how great he'd be, necessarily kind of paraphrased, in games, because he wasn't doing that exactly in practice and then exploded. How do you, especially with Pat on the staff, try to figure out if maybe there's a player who could explode in a game that's not exploding during practice, if you kind of get where I'm at, what I'm asking? How do you kind of marry that, okay, a legend didn't impress at this exact point 20 years ago, but then was the guy. You don't want to make the same mistake again, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's something again, I think we've talked about this, is having the quarterbacks go live. And, everyone's kind of got a different philosophy about it, but real football, quarterbacks are going to get hit. There's going to be free rushers. If you're running the ball, you're not just going to get tagged off. You're going to get tackled. And I think every year is different. Again, Tyler Huff didn't end up starting our first game last year and ended up being Conference Player of the Year. And, same thing with Pat, where he ended up being, obviously a great player for us, and he didn't start the first game. So every year is a little different. I wouldn't be surprised if even going into the year, multiple quarterbacks get reps, and we kind of have to see how it goes in the game. But, yeah, part of it is always going to be how's it look when you're live, when you're full speed. And we don't want guys to take unnecessary hits. So even when quarterbacks are live, if there's a free rusher, we'll try to blow the whistle so that way they don't get blow-up shots. But, every single quarterback on the team has gone live up to this point, and I think they've done a good job of taking care of the ball, holding the ball high and tight, all that type of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if this continues on into the season.
What influences you more, to his point, quarterback that has the ability to make explosive plays, or the same guy that makes killer mistakes? What works in your mind?
Yeah, that's always kind of the big question of, do you want a guy that's always going to do exactly what it's supposed to be and consistent versus a guy who's always going to have that home run play? But sometimes you have the home runs, but you have the interceptions as well. you kind of have to balance that out. And so I think, of course, we're looking for someone who can do what we want and have the big plays. But that's always the kind of challenge, especially in practice, too, when you aren't live. Like, oh, maybe he was sacked, but, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he made a guy miss, made a play downfield. And so, again, I think that's something that's always tough, and that's why sometimes it takes a couple games or it might even take a full season before you really know what you have in the room.
Some insight into Scotty Fox and Khalil Wilkins, the young guys.
Yeah, I think Scotty is, as a true freshman, again, he was here in the spring, but the thing that's really impressive about him is normally freshmen kind of hold on to the ball a little bit. They're back there, they wait, and they're late to something. And he's almost the opposite. He's almost going too fast, which, is a good thing. But he has great footwork, great mechanics, and he makes some throws and makes some decisions that you wouldn't anticipate out of a freshman. Of course, there's, big learning curve for him. But he's been really impressive. And the same thing for Khalil, younger guy. He wasn't able to get a lot of reps in the spring because of injury, but he's a guy that, as he gets more and more reps, he'll keep getting better. Obviously dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's broken off a few big runs already, and so really excited about his future.
There's a lot of stuff a quarterback can get better at, like arm strength, decision making with experience, but there's like this debate that accuracy is either there or it's not. Assuming a quarterback coach absolutely disagrees, and you can work on that, right? But how hard is it to, this late in the game, have that many reps in your life, from high school to college or whatever, if you're not that accurate? Can you get more accurate? How do you get a guy more accurate? Or is that just an elusive goal?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of that comes in the off season, and a lot of the guys now have quarterback coaches that they train with when they're back home, and they can have more time to really fine-tune the mechanics. Now in practice, we really have to get more scheme and assignment. And so I think just footwork and timing, a lot of accuracy with your arms starts with your legs, starts with your lower half, and that's something we preach on. But yeah, kind of like you said, at this point, a lot of the time you don't really want to change your throwing motion. Up to this point, we always try to get the ball out quick. That's part of it. But yeah, like you said, accuracy is something I think can improve. But at this point, we're not trying to really change a lot of mechanics and change how they throw the ball. It's just more footwork and timing and having your eyes in the right spot, knowing when to throw the ball.
It's not much hitting a target sometimes too, but throwing guys open. Can you just kind of describe the levels of accuracy? Because it's not just apple off the head, right? You have to do different things too.
Yeah, especially when there's moving targets. We always talk about when it's stationary, it's easy. You just hit them, right in the chest. But like we talked about, cover three, throw the seams, and you're supposed to throw it on your third step. So one big, two crossover, and throw. You throw them into that window. Sometimes if you're late, you hitch up. You have to put a little bit more velocity on the ball. And so I think when you throw it on time and when you see it on time, you can throw them into the window. And I think that's kind of the next step for our quarterbacks to make is right now I think there's still some of that trust factor of, okay, I think he's going to be there, but let me make sure he is before I throw it. And eventually we want to get to the point where we can throw them into windows, and that's, when our offense really gets going, gets big plays.
The head coach obviously has the ultimate hammer on making a decision. Are there any times, any things you can remember where you brought up something maybe he didn't agree with at first, but it proved out that what you were seeing was the way to go?
Yeah, I think my dad always likes to say everybody gets one vote, and his vote is worth all the rest combined plus one. So he reminds us of that a lot. But I think there's something he always likes. We say as a staff, we like winning too much not to change. And so if something gets brought up and you're like, man, that play just doesn't look right, we either fix it or throw it out. And I think seeing reps in practice helps. And, there's certain plays, of course, I always have suggestions. All the coaches have different ideas. And I think once we see reps, once we feel comfortable with where we're at, we can keep adding to the offense. But I think, again, we like winning too much not to change. We like winning too much not to play the best guys. So if there's a different way of doing things, we're always ready to adapt.
How does experience sort of play into this camp? Because Nico, Jalen, and Max have started, but they've never been like the full-time starter for a team yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I said before, when we were looking at guys in the transfer portal, yes, you can look at high school film, but seeing guys that have in-game, live, meaningful reps obviously means more. And I think, like you said, we have three guys that have had that in that position. Of course, Nico being here, Jalen and Max at their previous schools. So I think that gives you a little bit more comfort of when they go in the game, you can expect more of You can know what they're going to play like. Again, different system, different offense, different opponents, all that type of stuff. But having 3 guys in that spot is, I think, what makes it so hard. There's not a lot of separation right now between really a lot of the guys, more than just 3. And so I think, again, something might take longer into the season. But I think that the 3 older guys, like you said, have more experience. And so we feel a little comfortable with that. But the younger guys, too, have been really impressive. So we always try to say we get 3 guys ready to win with, and I think we have more than that at this point.
How was Jalen coming off a lost year for him, coming back from injury? Was he rusty in the spring? Is he kind of all the way back to where he was in 23?
Yeah, I think he's all the way back. I think it was right arm, and he says he should have a pretty mean stiff arm now because he's got some metal in there. But he's a great leader, super mature guy, and I think in the spring, when he got hit for the first time, he's like, hey, it's been like a year and a half since that happened. But, yeah, super mature guy. I think he's been coming along well. Really wants to win, has great intangibles. You see, he's always watching some extra film at the facility. So he's been great to have in the room.
Do you believe that he's in better shape now than he was in the spring, maybe because of the injury? It looks like he's a little slimmer and maybe just a little bit more agile than he was in the spring, but that could just be my eye.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple plays where he's taken off and hit pretty good speeds. And I think all the quarterbacks really, from the first tour of duties that we had, from all the way up to this point, I think they've all kind of gotten shape and understand the pace that we go at. And I think we've probably said this before, like even just taking the field, like we're going to sprint on and sprint off the field. A, for a psychological part, but B, just to get some conditioning in. We don't want to have to run a bunch of sprints. So if you run on and run off the field, there's 20, 30 yards every time that you don't have to maybe run after practice. But I think all of our guys can run. Again, some of them are maybe a little faster than others. But, yeah, I think everyone's in pretty good shape up to this point.
Have you had to do anything different just because the room is majority lefties?
We always try to, when we spot the ball, normally like the first play is on the left hash because you typically have right-handed quarterbacks. But now going into a series, we say, okay, who's in? If he's right-handed, we'll go on the left hash. If he's left-handed, we'll go on the right hash. So a little bit of that. But we've tried sprint outs really left and right, and most of the guys are pretty good at going either way. And so it's not a huge change, but again, normally you're better throwing to your dominant side. So if you're left-handed, rolling out left, right-handed, going out right. But I think most of the guys are pretty comfortable either way.
If you want to show like an example, but it's the opposite hand, can you like just flip the film and it works well enough?
It's funny, I always go back in the archives. I've got like all the film really from Arizona on, and we had, BJ Denker was a left-handed quarterback in 2013 that we had. And so anytime we have clips of him, I always try to throw that in there. That way we can see either way. But we've had some left-handed quarterbacks. Obviously, Pat White. I wish we had some of the film from those days. Maybe someone has them back there somewhere. But I always try to pull. I got clips from like Arizona, Ole Miss. And anytime there's a clip of me doing the play, that's always the first one I show. So it's like this is exactly what it's supposed to look like if there's any of me out there. But yeah, I try to show them clips of either way, and we do walkthroughs. I try to do it either way as well.
There's been more of an emphasis on the quarterbacks going live in preseason camp. How much does that weigh in the evaluation of them compared to maybe a normal drill that isn't full contact?
Yeah, and I told the quarterbacks this, that everything's being evaluated. Every practice matters. But when you are live and you are in scrimmages, those are really the first things that we're trying to base decisions off of. So, again, every day matters. But when you're live, that's really when, that's real football. Who's executing, who's moving the ball down the field at that point. And so, again, that's kind of more important than the other ones. Not that the other ones aren't. But that's kind of the first thing we look at is who's moving the ball, who's making people miss, and kind of making plays when it's a full live scrimmage.
Coach talked about this a little bit going in a couple weeks before the season, but when do you start getting the mindset of Robert Morris does this? Because that's your first opponent.
Yeah, we've already done like kind of a scouting of their team last year, and of course every team is always going to have a new year, but we're still pretty much focused on us at this point. Probably once more this next week and school starting, we'll get a lot more to scout teams. We haven't done that yet. But I think once that kind of gets going, we'll focus more on Robert Morris. But right now, again, we're seeing so many different looks on defense, which is great for us because any film that we're going to see, we've probably already seen that look in practice. And so once we get going, probably next week, we'll focus more on specifically what Robert Morris does.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.